Hi guys, it's me, Chazza HD, and welcome to the mid-season review for the 2023 Formula 1 season. Hope you guys are doing well. Of course, the last race we had right before the summer break was this time last week. Was a decent race looking back at it, and the weekend overall was pretty interesting. Of course, the rain did help with that on the Friday and the Saturday. But even the race on the Sunday in dry conditions, it was, there was a lot happening. Some surprises through the way as well. But to be honest, even though we've had a couple surprises this year, it's not been the most exciting season, has it? We haven't really had a proper great race this year. We've had some good races where, quite a bit has happened, but, quite a bit of that is not exactly, really exciting moments. Just, a bit more competitive races than some of the others we've had. But yeah, we've not had one or even, any more proper, great races when normally by this point of the year, even in other years where we've had domination by a certain team, I can name, one or two great races we've already had so far this season, but that just hasn't happened. Of course, Red Bull have dominated this season. They've won every race of the season so far. But again, despite that domination, we've just still not quite got a race that is, an 8 or a 9 out of 10 type of Grand Prix. So yeah, it's not been a great season, which is disappointing, but we have had some great things happen this year. Of course, Aston Martin and McLaren become front-running teams. Williams have improved quite a lot, and we've seen, certainly in the midfield, some good, interesting battles a lot of the season as well. So yeah, it's not been maybe as bad as some people would like to make out. I could probably think of worse seasons we've had than this, to be honest. But of course, in this mid-season review, what we're going to go through is not necessarily how exciting has this season been. There is a poll, by the way, running in the chat that I want you guys to vote in. The poll is me asking you guys, what is the best race of the 2023 Formula 1 season? Let me know what you think the best race is out of the options that I have put in the poll, which is Australia, Miami, I think Canada, and Austria. To me, those are the 4 best races I think we've had this season. If you disagree, and there's another race that's not in that poll that you think is, or is deserving to be mentioned as the best race of the season so far, make sure to put it in the comments or in the live chat as a comment, of course, and I'll make sure to read it out if I can during the stream. But what we're going to be getting into in this stream is not an absolute ton. It's going to be a longish stream because we have obviously a lot, to get through. We're going to be going through all the teams, getting into obviously the championship standings, and I will be doing my driver rankings for who has been the best driver, in my opinion, this season, all the way down to who has been the worst driver this season. We'll go through all the drivers that have obviously participated this season, and that'll be probably towards the middle of the stream. We'll get into those driver rankings, but we will start firstly with the championship standings. Before I get to that, though, I just want to say, hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you've had a good first week of the F1 summer break, and I hope you're all having as best a time so far in the month of August. And yeah, no matter what time it is in your part of the world and where you're watching from, hope you're all having a good one. Just to quickly say, if I do sound a bit stuffy or snotty, yeah, suffering with a bit of hay fever today. So yeah, you will have to bear with me at times. I will occasionally have to probably blow my nose, wipe my nose as well. So yeah, you just have to bear with me at certain points in time during this stream, because yeah, it's it's a nice day where I am, but yeah, I do struggle quite a bit with hay fever. And another thing I want to say as well is I am a bit tired because I had an absolutely mammoth day yesterday, where I was, I had a day out really from lunchtime until nearly 10 o'clock at night. So, yeah, I had a, very long day yesterday. Quite a bad sun and wind burn as well. So, yeah, I've had quite the day yesterday. So, I'm not exactly 100% physical condition, but definitely in good enough condition, of course, to bring you this stream. But yeah, let's start with, before we get into the teams, let's start with the championship standings at the summer break. We'll start on the driver's side. Max Verstappen is 125 points clear of Sergio Perez. I knew Verstappen was going to win this championship this season. Obviously, he hasn't officially won it yet. He will do so. Probably in October, I would imagine, is when it's most likely going to happen. Maybe even September, you don't know. But yeah, most likely in October. But I thought he'd win the championship pretty comfortably, but I did not think by this point of the season he would already be 125 points clear. I thought it would be more like 70 to 80 points clear of Perez. I didn't expect Perez to have the drop-off in form that he did from Monaco until, really, you'd have to say Hungary, and the race he had in Hungary, Perez, is where he really broke that bad streak, because at Spa he was back to his best, qualifying in third, leading the race for a bit, and then of course finishing second to his teammate, but of course is currently nowhere near his superstar, amazing teammate Max Verstappen, who is clearly heading for his third world championship at the age only of 25 years old. Just incredible how successful he has been already so far in his Formula One career. Perez in second, 40 points clear of Fernando Alonso in third, who is only 1 point clear of Lewis Hamilton. I definitely expected Hamilton to get ahead of Alonso during the Belgian Grand Prix weekend, but Mercedes did not quite pull off the best weekend they could. And of course, if Lewis Hamilton had not got that penalty in the sprint race at Spa for contact with Sergio Perez, then he would be up to third in the championship. But Alonso and Hamilton, I have to say, even though Verstappen has been, has had such an amazing season and is on this amazing streak of race wins, Alonso and Hamilton have been consistently great this season, and despite plenty of young, great talent out there, Leclerc, Russell, Norris, Piastri, all of these drivers, Alonso and Hamilton still right up there at the top, like they have been, since they were both on the grid for the first time back in 2007. Of course, Alonso starting his Formula One career quite a bit sooner. But yeah, I think they both had absolutely brilliant seasons. More on that later. Charles Leclerc now up to 5th place on 99 points, level on points with George Russell. The reason Leclerc is up to 5th ahead of Russell is because Leclerc, his best race result this season is second, when Russell's best is third in Spain. Leclerc's second place finish obviously was in Austria. Leclerc has had a better season than it looks in the championship. I think Leclerc, if he had a bit more luck in certain weekends, would probably not be that far away from Alonso and Hamilton. But yeah, it's definitely, as well though, it's not been Leclerc's best season. He's definitely not been as good as what we saw last year. George Russell in 6th, not a million miles away from his teammate, but he's clearly been a second fiddle Hamilton this year. Carlos Sainz in P7, Lando Norris in 8th, not too far away from that three of Leclerc, Russell, Sainz that have been so close to each other in the championship this season. Lance Stroll in 9th. The only reason he's in the top 10 is because of the car, really, because he's been terrible this year, Stroll. And in P10, Esteban Ocon, who of course had a brilliant race at Spa, coming from 14th on the grid to finish in 8th place and nearly finish in 7th ahead of the McLaren of Norris. So yeah, Ocon, good to see him back in some form. That was actually in Belgium. That was his first points finish since Canada. So yeah, quite important a finish there going into the summer break. Hopefully will lead to Ocon having a good second half of the season in what you would hope would be an improved Alpine car. Let's go on now to the bottom half of the championship. Oscar Piastri just a point behind Ocon. Piastri has had a very good debut season. Hasn't always had the greatest luck this year. Definitely hasn't been as good as his teammate, but yeah, Piastri has had a great season and he will get back into the top 10 of the championship. Probably after the next Grand Prix at Zandvoort. Pierre Gasly in P12. Alex Albon 13th. He's had a brilliant season for Williams. Hülkenberg 14th. Hülkenberg's had a great season, as we'll get on to later, but it's just the lack of tyre management from the car means that Hülkenberg's championship position is a lot worse than it probably should be, because he probably should be ahead of Gasly and Albon in the championship if the Haas had as quick of a car in in the races they did in qualifying, because Hülkenberg, of course, has had so many Q3 appearances. Valtteri Bottas in 15th, then Zhou 16th, Tsunoda 17th, Magnussen 18th, Logan Sargent 19th, Nick De Vries 20th, and Daniel Ricciardo 21st. The reason De Vries is ahead of Ricciardo is because De Vries' best result in the 10 races that he did was 12th, I think, in Monaco. Ricciardo's best so far is 13th in Hungary. Ricciardo will get ahead of De Vries down the championship, I'm pretty sure of that, given that he's started his time at AlphaTauri pretty well. So yeah, that's the Drivers' Championship. And on the Constructor side, Red Bull over 250 points clear of Mercedes. And I saw someone made this point on Twitter. And this with Red Bull, what could enable this to happen with them very much could happen when you consider that Red Bull have not had a single DNF in 2023. They've been incredibly reliable and, of course, have the best car. They have won every race so far this season. But Red Bull very much could end this season on 1,000 or even more than 1,000 points, which would be the first time in Formula One history that anyone has had 1,000 or more points in the championship. Can't remember exactly what teams had the most points. It's either got to be... It's probably Mercedes from like a few years ago, I'd imagine, who've had the most points in the Constructors' Championship. But yeah, that would be an incredible 2023 season for Red Bull if they not only won every race and Max Verstappen went on, and continued this crazy run of race victories, but to get up to and over 1,000 points would be just amazing. And I think there's probably a very, very, very small chance that anyone will repeat that in really the short term, in Formula One, especially if Red Bull's dominance comes to an end and then we have a competitive fight for championships once again. So yeah, that would be incredible if that was to happen. And it absolutely is possible for Red Bull, especially when you consider that Sergio Perez, had a run of races where he wasn't even on the podium. So they could have been on 600 or 650, maybe, if Perez had, done a bit better at certain race weekends. So, yeah, Red Bull definitely are on for a scary amount of points this season. Mercedes in second, they are 50 points clear, I think. 51, actually, points clear of Aston Martin. Mercedes have got second place on lock. They are definitely going to finish there. And even though Mercedes are not competitive in terms of fighting for race wins, and they are further away from winning a race now than they were a year ago. They are higher in the championship at this point than they were last year. Of course, last year they, at this point, were in third, and they went on to finish in third place. Compared to Ferrari, who were quite a few points ahead of them at this point last year, they're 56 points clear. So progress has been made on certain teams, but not, the big one that they want to make progress on. So, yeah. But I will say, I think, considering how they started the season and the difficulties they've had, and how really this car that they've had to, obviously change the concept of the design into something else that they're obviously going to properly, get the best out of, I would imagine, next year once they design the chassis to suit this concept. I think really they've managed that all very well, and I think considering all the trouble they've had this season, I think they've had really a very good season. I wouldn't say a great season, because of course a great season for Mercedes would be them fighting for the championship and winning, loads of races. But again, considering the issues they've had, I think they've done really well despite that. Of course, having the driver lineup they have really does help. They have the strongest driver lineup without doubt on the grid. So, yeah, it's been a very good season considering the issues. Aston Martin in third. A shame, because of course, for them, they were in second in the championship, and they were such an exciting team to watch, obviously, in the first, 8 races of the season, and then completely fell off, and really fell off into being a midfield team. And they still really are that, even though at Spa, of course, Fernando Alonso finished in 5th. They still have the pace of a midfield team. They haven't been really a front-running team since Austria, probably, or even Canada, when they had their last podium back in the middle of June. So, yeah, it's been a very disappointing fall-off, but after that result in Spa that was absolutely crucial, they do still hold on to third, and they are 5 points clear of Ferrari. But if this, downward spiral this season continues, then they're not going to hold on to third, and they're probably not even going to hold on to fourth, given that McLaren, back in 5th, are probably going to make a lot of progress on Aston Martin over the final, I think we've got, 10 or 11 races to go in 2023. So, going to be a difficult second half of the season unless they can make proper big improvements. We'll see what they can do. Ferrari, of course, it's been a poor season for them. They've only had 3 podiums all year, have had a pole position at least in Baku. And, they've had a couple weekends where they looked quick, but fundamentally, their car is really just broken. It's obviously it's from it's a remnant of the Binotto era, because the car was designed by the people that Binotto hired, and Binotto, of course, did have, despite him being team principal, he did have definitely quite a say over the technical side still of Ferrari. So, yeah, that's still coming back to haunt the team. That's why they've struggled this season, because the way the car was designed for this year has hurt what could have been not a championship winning season, because I don't think Ferrari are in the position to do that. But the in terms of the very poor race performances we've seen, and the lack of tyre management and all of that, which has obviously carried over from 2022, it's a fundamental problem with the car itself, and they're not going to be able to make serious progress on that until they design next year's car. Of course, they'll be in the process of doing that now, and it will be the first non-Binotto influenced car for quite a while, so maybe they will make some serious progress on that. Would be great if they could. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know for sure, what is causing the tyre wear issues, but I think it's just a fundamental chassis issue, really starting from the fundamental build of the car, and that's what has really cost them this year. Because if they could translate their qualifying pace they've had this year into race results, Ferrari would probably be second in the championship. They've been very quick still in qualifying this year. As I said, they had pole position in Baku. In Austria, I think they were second and third on the grid. Carlos Sainz has had a front row start. They've had plenty of great qualifyings this year, but they just can't turn it into that many great race results. Good to see Charles Leclerc on the podium in Spa, which was a surprisingly good result because I didn't think they would be on the podium. I thought Mercedes would be too quick for them, but yeah, I was surprised by their speed over Mercedes, and that was good to see and encouraging for them going into the second half of the year, because of course they do have a bit of time still to develop this 2023 car compared to, say, Mercedes. I think an extra 10% of wind tunnel time they have compared to Mercedes for second half of this year. So yeah, Ferrari, for this season, I mean, we're not going to be looking really at the rest of the season in this stream, but for Ferrari, what do you call it? 2023 is not all lost for them. There's definitely still things to, progress to be made, absolutely, for them. Firstly, getting up to third in the championship would be the start. McLaren in fifth, of course, they start the season so poor, but now that their car is one of the best out there, they're up to fifth in the championship, and they are very quickly catching Aston Martin and Ferrari ahead. That could be very interesting to see how they can catch. Alpine in sixth. I don't think Alpine have had a terrible season, but it's definitely been underwhelming compared to expectations. Williams in seventh. What a season they've had. Highest place in the championship for them since 2017. What a season for Williams. Haas then are in eighth, with Alfa Romeo ninth and AlphaTauri in P10. Of course, AlphaTauri finished second last in the championship. So yeah, those are the championship standings, and obviously they will change, but between now and the end of the season. But I don't think they're going to change that much. If I'm being honest, I don't think we're going to see that many big changes. Did want to say quickly, for everyone watching, make sure to smash that like button. You can see we're already on 14 likes. Try and get up to 20 plus if we can in the next few minutes. That'd be great if we could. What was I going to say? Yeah, so now we're going to get into some of the teams and get a bit more in depth as to how those teams have done so far this season. We'll start with the top teams. We're not going to go through all the teams at once. I will make sure to split it up because I do want to get to soon my driver rankings for this season, because I know you guys will be very interested in that. And I do want to hear from you guys, by the way, in the comments and in the chat. What is your top 10 drivers of the season so far? Let me know in the chat or in the comments. I don't mind either way. Of course, I'll be looking at the comments after the stream finishes as well. So, yeah, give me your top 10 drivers of the season so far. And again, I'll get onto mine soon enough. But we will start, of course, with the Red Bull team. 100% record in 2023. What a season it has been. Even back in testing, where I knew Red Bull were going to dominate this season, I did not think they were going to be dominating this hard. I did not think they would be winning every race of the season. I thought they'd win probably 85%, probably at most, of the races this year, even up to this point. But yeah, to have a 100% record still and to have won 13 races in a row in Formula 1, because of course they did win the final race of 2022. Just incredible. This team really, since the start of this, ground effect era that's come back in Formula 1, of course, after the 1980s, they have really obliterated everyone. Ferrari, of course, did put up quite a stern challenge for the first half of 2022. But once Red Bull figured out how to get the best out of their car, Ferrari also were affected by the technical directive last year, and of course, Ferrari have made some decisions on the design of their car which have not paid off, and it's led to them, really falling quite far behind the Red Bull team. Red Bull have, ever since then, just obliterated everyone. Red Bull, it's actually funny, since the summer break last year, guys, Red Bull have won every single race except one since the summer break of 2022. And that one race was the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, where, of course, Mercedes got a 1-2. Every other race since, I think, the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix, or even going back to the, 2022 French Grand Prix, just before the summer break of last year, Red Bull have won all of them, except that one race in Brazil. Just amazing. We've not seen domination like that really ever before. To this type of level, it's just absolutely incredible. The performance by the team, no matter how big or small the gap is to the rest of the field, has always been immaculate. Obviously, pit stops amazing, strategy amazing. The drivers, Max Verstappen has been amazing. Sergio Perez most of the time has been good. He's had his poor races and poor race weekends for sure. We've seen some of them this year, but drivers have been great as well. And of course, Adrian Newey has designed yet another magnificent machine. And really, Red Bull are not going to be stopped, are they? For the rest of this year. I think Red Bull legitimately could win every race this season, which would be an incredible achievement. And you know what? If we do get 3-4 races out from the end of the season and they've still won every race, I probably will support them in trying to get, every race won, because I would love to see history being broken. Of course, McLaren in 1988 came so close to winning every race that year. Fell short, of course, famously at the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, where Ferrari secured the 1-2 shortly after Enzo Ferrari's death. Yeah, if Red Bull were to win every race this season, I just think that'd be such a magnificent achievement. And they would absolutely deserve it, because again, not just do they have the best car, but operationally, we are looking at quite possibly the greatest team of all time from an operational standpoint. Even Mercedes, when they were dominating, there were certain areas where they weren't quite 100%. Management of drivers, obviously during the Rosberg-Hamilton era, there was the occasional race weekend where reliability would cost them. But with Red Bull, as I said, they've not had a single DNF in 2023. So, yeah, how do you stop this Red Bull team? Because if they stay that reliable for the rest of the year, even if one Red Bull drops out, the other Red Bull is probably just going to take that place and win anyway. Just incredible. And like I said, operationally, I think quite possibly Red Bull are one of the greatest teams we have ever seen, because they just make sure to get the absolute most out of whatever car they've got every single weekend, no matter if the cars behind are close in performance to them, miles away, doesn't matter. They get the best out of their car and their team, and that's why they end up winning every week. It's just been an incredible season. Max Verstappen, as I said, 8 wins in a row, only needs 2 more wins, obviously consecutively, at the Dutch Grand Prix and the Italian Grand Prix, which is a back-to-back right after we come back from the summer break. If he wins those 2 races, he will have the longest winning streak in Formula 1 history. The longest winning streak is Sebastian Vettel in 2013 of 9, where he won, I think, from the Belgian Grand Prix of 2013 until the Brazilian Grand Prix at the end of that year. Yeah, 9 races in a row. Can Max do it? We'll see. He'd certainly be deserving of doing it if he can just make sure he delivers on those 2 weekends, especially. Of course, at Zandvoort, we know he's going to deliver. Monza will be a tougher weekend. Obviously, Ferrari should be competitive there to a certain extent, and qualifying definitely will be interesting that weekend. But yeah, Red Bull quite possibly are going to win every race this season. And let me know in the chat, guys, will Red Bull win every race remaining in 2023? Be very interested to hear what you guys have to say on that. Before we move on, though, to the next team, being Mercedes, let's just touch on the drivers. So Max is 10-2 over Perez in qualifying and the races. A lot more dominant from Max compared to Perez than what we saw in 2022, this point of the season. I mean, Max was still dominant, of course, to a degree, up until the summer break last year, but wasn't quite as quick compared to Perez as he has been, of course, this season. And Max has just been absolutely incredible. Perez, I don't think Perez, if you look at the entire season so far, I don't think Perez has had as bad of a season as people make out. Yeah, he did have a bad stretch of races. There is no doubt about that. But when you look at a load of the other races, you know, the first 5 races of the season, for example, he was performing, except for the Australian Grand Prix, so let's say 4 of the first 5 races, he's performing exactly how Red Bull wanted. He won 2 of the first 5 races, and thankfully for them, got back in form in the last couple races before the summer break. So I would say half the time Perez has been doing exactly what Red Bull want him to do. The other half of the time he has been terrible. There is no doubt about that. But I don't think Perez still has been as bad as, say, others out there. And I don't think Perez, I don't think Perez has been abysmal like some people make out for the entire year. Yeah, at certain times of the season, his form has been abysmal, but not entirely for this season. But yeah, Max has had a stunning season, and we'll see if him and the team can continue that for the rest of 2023. Next up, Mercedes-Benz. As I said earlier, they have got the best out of what is kind of a budget job from them. Started the year with the zero pod design, and as we know from last year, it's a failed concept. It was never going to work, and they had to get their act together quickly and get on the program that others were on with their design. Thankfully, were able to bring that new side pod concept and design for the Monaco Grand Prix, race 6 of the season. It was in Monaco. But yeah, considering at the start of the year, they were, a second and a half slower than Red Bull. I think in the first race of the season in Bahrain in the race, and then even in Saudi Arabia where they were a bit more competitive in the second race, they were quite clearly at least a second away from Red Bull. I think they've made good progress this year, because if you look at, where we've been with Mercedes in the last month, obviously Silverstone, which is, not a short racetrack. It's quite a difficult racetrack, and it really does show who has overall, a real good car. They weren't that quick in qualifying compared to Ferrari and McLaren, but they were only half a second slower than Red Bull. Red Bull then brought a new upgrade to their side pod inlet, which has increased their pace by, it appears, probably about a third of a second at least. And that's why Red Bull have dominated so hard in the last couple races. So yeah, I think that's made Mercedes look it's made their progress look a bit worse than it's actually been. But I mean, obviously in Hungary they got pole position. They didn't have the quickest car in qualifying. Hamilton really just produced a great lap. That's why they got pole position, but that wasn't possible at the start of the season. It just was not possible. And of course, ever since that upgrade, they've had lots of podiums. A double podium in Spain, podium in Canada, podium at Silverstone, very close to a podium in Hungary. And they weren't too far away before Hamilton's final pit stop for a fastest lap at Spa for a podium. So they've clearly improved. They've improved quite a bit, but there is still a long way to go if they're really going to gain on Red Bull to try and somehow stop them from winning every race this season. The two drivers have had, I mean, well, let's start with this man on screen quickly, George Russell. Russell has not been terrible. He's not been, as bad as Perez or Stroll, this season. There's definitely been quite a few worse drivers this year, but he has had a very inconsistent season, especially when you compare it to his debut year at the Silver Arrows, where he was consistently in the top 5, regularly on pace, if not quicker, and beating Lewis Hamilton in the races, no matter the context of how he beat him. But that just hasn't been the case this season. And even though it is a bit of a conspiracy theory, it is true. Since they got rid of the zero pod design and went to new side pods, Russell has not been the same driver. He absolutely has not. I think he's only beaten Lewis Hamilton in qualifying, I think only once since that new side pod upgrade in Monaco, when in the first 5 races of the season, I think Russell was beating Hamilton in qualifying by, I think it was 3-2 over Hamilton, something like that. And then, since then, he's only beaten him in qualifying. Is it twice or once? I'm not sure exactly, but it's been a lot less times he's beaten him in qualifying since then, for sure. George Russell has had a disappointing year, and he is not performing to the level that he should be given his talent. We saw last year what his potential is, and it's a very high potential, but we haven't seen that enough this season. He has had some good races, there is no doubt about it. Australian Grand Prix weekend, he was in great form. Would have loved to have seen what would have happened in his race if he had not had his DNF and Mercedes had not pitted him under what they believed to be a safety car, then turned into a red flag, which really cost him major track position. With Russell, that was obviously a great weekend. Saudi Arabia, he had a great weekend. Miami, considering how slow Mercedes were that weekend, I thought he did very well. Silverstone, even though he didn't finish on the podium, he was legitimately faster than Hamilton in qualifying and in the race, despite Hamilton securing the podium, really because of a lucky virtual safety car for Hamilton compared to Russell. So the pace and the performance, it's there, but he's just not showing it consistently like he was last season. So that's really what we need to see in the second half of the season from Russell, is consistency. And if you can show that, then maybe at the start of next year, if Mercedes are a lot better, then Russell can get back into the form we saw in 2022. We will see how, how he gets on in the second half of the year. But Lewis Hamilton, though, if I could just quickly find him, there you go. He is not at his absolute best, but he is pretty much back to his best. What a season he's had. Constantly delivered for Mercedes. He has, I think, finished every race this season and had a great season. It's been, brilliant for him and the team. Of course, got his first pole position, considering, how long it was, how long he had to wait for that next pole position after his last one was in Saudi Arabia in 2021. It was, a very special moment, Hamilton getting that pole in Hungary, because it really was not down to the car like other people, would like to say in the past. It was purely Lewis Hamilton producing, as he usually does, on a Saturday, a stunning lap that gets him pole position. That's why he's got so many pole positions in Formula One history. So Hamilton, I think, has had a great season. Of course, has scored almost every podium for the team. Only Russell, I think Russell only has one podium in total for 2023. So yeah, Hamilton's had a brilliant year. And the real stand-up races, I would say, for him have been Australia to a degree, even though he was slower than Russell in qualifying. What do you call it? Canada, I thought he was very good there. Spain, he had a great weekend. Hungary, of course. Really a shame he missed out on the podium, because I think if he hadn't had his overheating issues in the race, I think definitely that was a possibility for him. And even at Spa, even though he didn't finish on the podium, I thought he was really performing at a very high level for the team. So, yeah, really great to see Hamilton definitely performing a lot better than he did in 2022, in especially the first half of the year. No doubt about that whatsoever. But like I've said, with Mercedes, considering how they start the season and how they've had to change the design, and it doesn't quite fit with what they originally designed for the car, and they're just having to really make it up as they go along, because really their focus now is, next year's car, which they hope to really, start the season off with a bang compared to how they started this year, where they were well over a second slower than Red Bull. I think they've done really well considering the circumstances, and they are definitely going to secure second in the championship. So, yeah, I'd have to say a very good season for Mercedes. And it shows that once they get back to having a car that is as quick as Red Bull, they're absolutely good enough to win multiple races again. They're absolutely good enough, because they're still operationally, they're not operationally performing at as high level as Red Bull are, but still are performing at a very high level, and they're still operationally, I'd say, performing like a team that is, world championship material. It's just the car. That's really all they're missing, is the pace of the car being up there with Red Bull. Of course, we'll see next year how they get on with that, but maybe in the second half of the year, with one final big upgrade, they can maybe snatch one victory this season, which I think would be a very good recovery for this year. We do expect a big upgrade for them, one big upgrade, final upgrade for them for this season. Not sure exactly where that will come, but if it's a proper big upgrade, then you would imagine that it would move them a bit closer to Red Bull and eliminate the gain of time that Red Bull have obviously, gained with that new side pod inlet that they came up with back in Hungary. But with the two drivers in qualifying, has been close. Lewis is 7-5 over Russell in qualifying. In the races, it's 7-3 over Russell. The reason it only adds up to 10 on the race side is because we've excluded two races where one of the drivers had a DNF. So, yeah, in the races, Lewis has been definitely much better than Russell. And that's really where Russell has got to look to improve, is the races. Because there's been even race weekends where, he's qualified well, but then just not really delivered in the race. Canada, he was, right behind his teammate, I think, on the grid. But, just didn't quite deliver in the race. Obviously made that mistake, and then his car broke down later on, but he really put himself in that situation. But yeah, that's really what he needs to focus on, Russell, if he's going to really get back on terms with Lewis Hamilton for the rest of the season. And yeah, again, considering all those issues they've had, 5 podiums in 2023 is a very good recovery job from this team. Now let's go on to Aston Martin. Of course, at the start of the season, they were such a wonderful surprise. Fernando Alonso, in the first 6 races, was on the podium 5 times, was very close to a pole position in Monaco. And looking back in Monaco, probably should have won the race if Aston Martin had made the right decision with what tyres to go on to at his only pit stop. Of course, they went for the dry tyres when they should have gone for the inters, but they didn't take the gamble that really should have been taken. And it later showed with Aston Martin that with their simulations that they believed they would have took the lead and won the race if they had done that. So yeah, such a shame that they couldn't get that. I think that's a potential race win they're going to look back on for quite a while. Because, if you look how they've really fallen off in 2023, they're nowhere near winning a race this season. Not only that, they're nowhere near being on the podium. Even at Spa, where Alonso finished in 5th place, Alonso still finished miles off Charles Leclerc, who finished on the podium. I'll just quickly look at what the gaps were at Spa. Yeah, Alonso finished 24 seconds away from Leclerc, so he was, on average, half a second per lap slower than Leclerc. Obviously not because of his own pace, but because of how Aston Martin have just dropped off in 2023. And it has been a very disappointing last couple races or so leading into the summer break. But by a miracle, they're still in 3rd in the championship, mostly because of Ferrari's typical incompetence at times, which they are improving on Ferrari, but it's still there. They haven't quite got rid of the problem, have the Scuderia. But what Aston Martin need is quite simple. They need a big upgrade to get them back in the game, because they're not in the game right now. They're just hanging on, hoping that the teams around them don't take advantage of their poor pace. Because at the minute, Aston Martin are the 5th quickest team in Formula 1, when back at, the Monaco Grand Prix, and really in the first 6 races of the season, they had the 2nd best car by a decent margin as well. So, yeah, it's quite incredible how they've dropped off that much in, 2 months, 2.5 months. But that's how it has gone. And like I said, they need to get back in the game. There is a couple racetracks as well, which should suit their car quite well, which are coming up actually pretty soon after the summer break. Zandvoort, I think they're going to have a good weekend. Singapore as well, not just because the track layout's suiting their car a bit more, but Fernando Alonso always been incredibly quick around the streets of, I think, Marina Bay it is. So, if they can come back from the summer break straight away with a big upgrade and it improves their pace by 3 to 5 tenths of a second, say, then, yeah, they're right back in the game and they can absolutely then start to, fight for podiums again and would have still a pretty decent chance at finishing 3rd in the championship. But as it stands, they're not going to do that. They're going to fall down probably to 5th, because McLaren, at the minute, even though at Spa, they didn't have the greatest weekend, or the greatest race, let's say McLaren are faster than them. They're way faster than them. It's not really close between the two teams. I mean, we saw in Hungary, obviously a high aero track, a really good track to illustrate, a really good track to illustrate just who has made progression and who, on the aerodynamic side is really excelling. They finished, 42 seconds away from the quickest McLaren of Lando Norris. So that is a lot of time to make up. That's an average of, I think, 6 tenths of a second, or maybe 5.5 tenths of a second they were losing per lap to McLaren in Hungary, which is a lot of time, especially around a short racetrack. So, yeah, Aston Martin have got a lot of work to do, and really their second half of the season is not completely dependent on upgrades, but 80% of the rest of their year is absolutely dependent on upgrades. We'll see how they do with that. Quickly with the drivers, Lance Stroll has been one of the worst drivers this season. I'll let you guys know in a moment just how bad I think he has been in 2023 compared to the rest of the field. Yeah, he's been pathetic. He's had a couple decent races, but other than that, he's been absolutely terrible. And given his current performance level, he's not deserving of being in that team, because that car this season has been way better than he has made it look in the second Aston Martin. I don't know if he's still suffering, from the remnants of that wrist. Was it broken wrist he had? Back in, just before pre-season testing. Maybe that's the reason why, but yeah, he has been very bad this season. And for Fernando Alonso, as you can see here, so close to victory in Monaco of Aston Martin and just made the right decision. And it was also so close to pole position, which really would have helped with race win. Yeah, Fernando has been amazing. Absolutely amazing. And he's illustrated that, what do you call it? He has he is no slower than he was 10 years ago when he was last regularly on the podium, obviously back then 2013, for the Ferrari team. So yeah, Alonso still at his best, performing at an amazing level. I mean, we knew that Alonso still had all of that performance, and it was only a matter of him getting into a good enough car to show that he can fight with the best still, and still be one of the best drivers in the world, which he is absolutely right now. So yeah, an amazing season for Alonso, and on the driver's side, Alonso is Aston Martin's only hope of securing third in the championship, which would be a good save, considering, how really this year has evolved to this point. Quickly though, before we move on to Ferrari, let's just look at the driver comparisons. 10-2 for Alonso over Stroll in qualifying, 10-1 in the races, only one race excluded from that, which is the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, where Stroll had a DNF because of I think ERS failure it was in Jeddah. But yeah, Alonso has completely dominated his teammate. Stroll, I know, was never going to beat Alonso, but he's been nowhere near him, not just been beaten by him, he's been absolutely destroyed by Fernando. Even in qualifying, when Fernando's not the best qualifying driver, there's lots of drivers on the grid which are better than Fernando over a single lap. So yeah, Stroll has been especially poor in qualifying. Aston Martin, though, despite falling off to where they are now, they have the most amount of podiums out of any team except for Red Bull. 6 podiums, one more than what Mercedes have. So that is something to be proud of, and absolutely the potential is there for them to get back to it. They just need to improve their car to get back to that level. And you never know, there is still a chance to win a race, because fundamentally this car is a very good car. They just need to keep up with the rate of development of the other teams. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go onto Ferrari, then onto McLaren, and then I am going to get into my driver rankings, and then I'll come to you guys in the live chat. So don't worry, I will get to your comments very soon. Let's go on to the Scuderia Ferrari team, and I've already talked obviously quite a bit about them so far in this stream, and as I said, the reason this season has been disappointing, even compared to Mercedes and Aston Martin and how they've done compared to Ferrari, is because they're still suffering from the Binotto era, because this car was influenced absolutely by the design team that he led, and Binotto still had influence clearly over the technical side of the car, and that's what has caused this Ferrari car to just not be that great. In qualifying, they've been most of the time the second best team in qualifying in 2023, but again, because of a fundamental issue with the car, with the chassis, I believe, they can't look after their tyres. They burn their tyres out so quickly compared to other teams, and not only that, they also cannot get the tyres to work properly in certain operating windows. They'll put, a different compound on and the car will feel completely different. Sometimes they'll use the same compound twice in a race. In one of those stints, the car will feel terrible. In the other one, it feels absolutely fine. There's just no consistency when it comes to the feeling from the tyres connecting with the car. And again, my belief is that there's a fundamental issue with the car itself, the chassis, the suspension, all of that, which can't be really fixed until next season, fundamentally. So, yeah, it's a big issue for the Ferrari team. And there's not much they can do about it other than just improve on a flawed car, really. Their car has improved more so recently. They were struggling quite a bit up until really, say, Canada, Austria time, where their results started to improve and their pace overall started to improve, and ended the first half of the year with a very nice podium for Leclerc at Spa. And given that they do have more wind tunnel time for the rest of this year compared to Red Bull, Mercedes and Aston Martin, because they were fourth in the championship on the 30th of June, they've still got some time to rescue this season in a way, and at least secure a top 3 finish in the championship, which would be something for them to, I guess, not be necessarily proud of, but something for them to be satisfied about, given that Aston Martin, of course, have been so quick this season at times, and McLaren are now incredibly fast. So, yeah, we will see if Ferrari can use that slightly extra wind tunnel time to their advantage, and whether they can improve their car by another 2 to 3 tenths of a second to try and get back into the position of being, say, the second best team on the grid. But yeah, Ferrari, like I said, fundamental flawed car design, which is not really anything you can blame the new team principal Fred Vasseur for, because he obviously started in the new year and the design of the car was already settled on. So yeah, I feel a bit sorry for him because he's been kind of handicapped for this year. But I think really 2024 is what we can judge Fred for. I don't think we can really look at 2023. And what do you call it? I don't think we can look at 2023 and really put that on Fred at all. Because again, the car, it's not really a result of his hirings or running of the team. The only thing you could put on Fred, I think, for this year is still there is some issues with the operational side of the team. I've got to say though, they have made quite big improvements on that. They're nowhere near as they're nowhere near as error prone, let's say, as they were. Still, their pit stops are not great. They have made a couple poor strategy decisions, and yeah, they haven't been the greatest at just managing their races or their qualifying sessions operationally, but they've definitely improved on it. There is no doubt about that, and as time goes on, that should improve. And I don't think Fred Vasseur is really done with his hiring of new people and firing of others. Great decision, by the way, for him to get rid of Inaki Rueda. Obviously, Inaki is still with the team, but he is not the strategist for Ferrari anymore. That is now Ravin Jain, who has been quite a bit better than him, than Rueda, of course. And if only they had made that decision, Ferrari 7 years ago, they probably would be would have ended up maybe in better positions in the past. But what do you call it with Ferrari? Yeah, this season they've been a bit handicapped by the previous regime, let's say, and they've not really been able to overcome that. But with the two drivers, Charles Leclerc, got to say, he's not had the greatest season. This is definitely not one of his better years. But I don't think he's been poor. Yeah, he's made a couple of mistakes. He's had a couple of weekends where he's not been that great. But most of the time, he has been the Leclerc we all know and love. So I don't think there is really that much or that big of an issue with him. I think a lot of his issues have been with him not being very comfortable with the handling of the car. I mean, we saw that from testing. He wasn't very comfortable with the handling of the car. Nowhere near as comfortable with it as he was in 2022. And of course, 2022, we saw the best version we've ever seen of Charles Leclerc. So, yeah, I don't think Leclerc's been as bad as people are making out. He's still one of the top few drivers on the grid. There is absolutely no doubt about that. For Carlos Sainz, I can just get a picture of him up. There you go. Well, thankfully, the picture of Sainz, new picture of Sainz on the screen. I thought I was going to go to another Leclerc one. I saw somewhere in the chat, I don't know who it was, a couple races ago, who said, you know, Sainz has been consistent this year. He has, but I wouldn't say he's been consistently good. He's just been consistently average. He's not really done anything this season that I would say is remarkable or great even. He's had just an average season. He's not been as good as his teammate. I'll, give you the stats in a moment that just proves that. In the races, he's been a lot more competitive compared to Leclerc, which is good. He's closer to Leclerc on performance, but I think that's probably more so because the handling of the car suits him more than it suits Leclerc. But yeah, I don't think Sainz has had a great season or even a very good season. It's just been maybe a slightly good season for him, you could say, at best. But given his talent and performance of the car, I'd say it's just been an average season for him. Better than last year, but only because he's making less mistakes. Other than that, I don't think he's really performing that much better. And I don't think this is really the best Carlos Sainz we're seeing. Definitely not as good as the Sainz we saw in 2021 or 2020. Or even 2019, for that matter. So, yeah, Carlos, not a great season, put it that way. But yeah, Ferrari, 4th in the championship. Still got a very good chance to finish 3rd. But it's not going to be necessarily easy. Because, if Aston Martin do bring a big upgrade and they get themselves back in the game. Plus, with McLaren being so quick and only, 90 points behind, or 88 points, I think it is exactly behind, on McLaren in the championship compared to Ferrari. With the amount of races we've got to go, McLaren absolutely can catch the Ferrari team. So it's going to be a tricky second half of the season, but not necessarily a bad second half of the year. But their wait for an F1 win, sadly, does go on. Their last win was 13 months ago, July 2022. And it's going to be probably until next March until they win another race. So yeah, Ferrari once again on another long drought when it comes to race wins. Let's just quickly go on to some stats with the drivers. So in qualifying, Leclerc has been 8-4 over Sainz. Again, Sainz has been closer to Leclerc, but he's not been better or on the same level. And then in the races, 7-3 for Leclerc. 2 races excluded from the race there, the race stat, because there were a couple races where one of the drivers did not finish. And then Ferrari, 3 podiums in 2023, and all of those podiums have been taken by the Monegasque himself in Baku. Sorry, Baku, that sounds weird. Baku, Austria, and of course the last race we had at Spa. So yeah, Leclerc's definitely still been better than Sainz and is better than Sainz. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, that's how it's looking on the driver's side. And let's finally, before we go on to the rankings of the drivers, go on to the final front-running team, McLaren. Well, what a incredible turnaround from them. Coming into the season, every McLaren fan and everyone involved with the McLaren, and even most F1 fans, were fearing the worst because they were legitimately coming into the season saying, we're not going to be good. We are going to be terrible. We might even struggle to get out of Q1. And there were times where they did struggle at the start of the season to get out of Q1. It was not as poor of a start to the season as I expected, to be honest, after testing. Sorry about that. Yeah, it wasn't as poor as I expected, because we have to remember Piastri did get into Q3 in the second race of the year. They had a double points finish in Australia. Norris got into Q3 and finished in the top 10 in Baku. In Spain, Norris qualified in the top 3. So again, it wasn't as bad of a start to the year as I expected it to be, but it was not good. It was, yeah, quite poor. And I really thought McLaren were, or didn't really have until this massive upgrade they brought in Austria, which has transformed their season. I did not see them finishing at all in the top 5 of the championship. The best I saw was 6th place, which they looked to be likely-ish to, to get. But, yeah. It just wasn't looking like it was going to be a positive season. Of course, last season, McLaren saw as a real failure, and they finished 5th. So, yeah, it wasn't looking good at all for McLaren. But then in Austria, as I said, new side pod and floor, and basically a new car for them. And suddenly, they're going a second lap quicker than they were before. Just incredible. McLaren obviously secured podiums in Hungary and at Silverstone. Was 2nd and 3rd on the grid at Silverstone. 3rd and 4th on the grid in Hungary. And were within a 10th of a second of pole position in Hungary. And even at Spa, had 2nd in the sprint race. And despite having the wrong setup, was still decently quick through the weekend. So, yeah, McLaren, what a transformation for them. And they are really, in the second half of the year, the team to look out for. McLaren, 88 points behind Ferrari and 93 points behind Aston Martin. With the amount of races we've got to go, and we've got quite a few tracks that will suit this McLaren car as well, I have no doubt that it's possible. All they need to do is make sure that both drivers consistently score the points. Both drivers have been performing very well. Lando Norris, I could just start with him. Just find a picture of him. There you go. Yeah, Lando Norris has had an absolutely brilliant year. Has shown that he is one of the top few drivers in the world. No doubt about that. And I wouldn't say he's necessarily even better than he was a couple years ago in 2021, where we saw him securing podiums, but he is absolutely back at that level on a consistent basis that we saw at times last year, but definitely in 2021, which is why in 2021 he was, for me, one of the top 3 best drivers that year. So, yeah, for Lando Norris, absolutely brilliant season. Even though Oscar Piastri has had a good debut year in Formula 1, has dominated him in the qualifying and race battle, and has been McLaren's main man, and has secured some brilliant results for the team. Some of the laps he's done in qualifying this year have been incredible. For example, in Spain, 3rd on the grid, and that's before the upgrade. Just incredible. He had, I think, in in Baku, I think he was like 7th or 8th. I mean, McLaren, they did bring an upgrade in Baku, I remember, to the front wing or something, which improved their pace a bit, but still, Incredible weekend he had there. Most of the time, like I said, Lando has been in really top form and is one of the best drivers in Formula 1. No doubt about that whatsoever. For Oscar Piastri, what a debut season. He's not been on the same level as Lando Norris. I think we have to say that. But he is not very far away from Lando on pace. There is absolutely zero doubt about that. Oscar has been, a lot of the time, only a tenth or two behind, even less than that at times, behind his teammates. So, for a debut season, given that Oscar Piastri, I mean, he's only, 22 years old? He's going to get better. He's probably going to make quite a bit of improvement in the next, say, 2 to 3 years. This is a very encouraging debut for him in Formula 1. Still waiting for that first race podium on the Sunday. Obviously did finish second in a sprint race at Spa, which doesn't count as a podium. But yeah, he is very close to securing that. Should have got it at Silverstone. Not necessarily should have got it in Hungary, but he had a great performance there as well in the first half of the race. I've got to say, as well, like Lando, there's been a couple qualifying laps this year from him that have been truly special. Saudi Arabia, despite having such a slow car, especially in a straight line, which is really important to have a very quick car in a straight line at that track in Saudi Arabia, was, 8th on the grid, was it? It was just an incredible performance from Piastri. There was also in Canada, where he qualified in 8th place, despite him never ever driving around that track before. That was a really special weekend for him. Yeah, Silverstone, of course, 3rd on the grid, only a 10th away from his teammate, Lando Norris. And then you had Hungary, just behind his teammate as well. And then out-qualified, Lando. And was probably going to outrace Lando in the Sunday race if it wasn't for contact with Carlos Sainz at turn 1 on the first lap last weekend. So yeah, great debut season. Oscar Piastri, I think, absolutely is a top Formula 1 driver. He's not one of the top Formula 1 drivers. I'm not saying he's on the same level as a Max Verstappen or a Fernando Alonso or Lewis Hamilton quite yet, or even his teammate Lando Norris. He's not quite there yet, but he is absolutely a top driver. He's not a midfield caliber driver. There is no way he is on that sort of level. He is, one of the top few on the grid. There is zero doubt in my mind about that. Not just from what I've seen performance-wise, but the talent, the ability, all of that, the skill. He's one of the best out there. So yeah, great season for him. Great season for Lando and McLaren. Their season is turning into certainly a great season. If they were to secure 3rd in the championship at the end of this year, what season that would be going into next year's car, which will be the first fully designed car with their new operational wind tunnel. Can't wait to see what that produces in 2024. Also, massive shout out to massive shout out to Andrea Stella, the new McLaren team principal for this season. What a job he's done. He's been absolutely amazing to turn around the fortunes of this team. Of course, he does have quite a bit of technical knowledge. I'm sure has helped on that side as well. And with the reorganization of the team that he helped, obviously, with Zach Brown, reorganize the team into the state it's in now, they put McLaren in a much better position. So yeah, what a fantastic first year as team boss for Andrea Stella. Brilliant to see someone who 10 years ago was Fernando Alonso's race engineer at Ferrari, who is now team principal at McLaren's. Transformation I did not see happening in this 10-year period. But yeah, it is so great to see him succeeding so well. But in terms of the drivers, let's just look at some stats regarding the drivers. Yeah, in qualifying, Lando has dominated Oscar 10-2. In the races as well, Lando has dominated Oscar 9-2 in that area. The only race that is excluded from the race stat is Bahrain, where Piastri retired. with I think a gearbox failure it was in the first race of the season. So yeah, that's why it's 9-2, not 10-2, or 9-3 for Lando in the races. And McLaren, 2 podiums this season, but you would imagine that's going to go up quite a bit between now and the end of the season. What a season for McLaren. Now, the rest of the teams we'll get into soon. Let's go back to these pictures for now. Move on to another picture. There you go. So, I will come to your comments, guys, in the live chat. I've just seen a great one from Ottomaya Parker saying Stella has done a stellar job. That's absolutely brilliant pun. Why didn't I think of that? Seriously, why didn't I think of that? It makes so much sense. Yeah, make sure to keep posting your comments in the chat. Love to hear what you guys have to say. And as well, make sure to let me know right now, what is your top 10 drivers of the season so far? Because in a moment, I'm going to get through my entire list and rankings of each driver this season. And you can let me know what you think of my rankings and whether you think I'm wrong on certain drivers or not. Before I do that, though, just want to update you guys what the next 2 live streams are going to be. So, I will be live next Sunday at 12:30 PM UK time for an F1 2024 driver lineup analysis. It's not going to be like other F1 YouTuber videos or even videos I've done on driver lineups in the past where I do my predictions. What I'm going to do is look at the performances of certain drivers this season, look at, who is rumoured maybe to be moving and hasn't, signed a contract to say next year yet. And really just analyse all of that, look at maybe who deserves to be at certain teams or even on the grid and who doesn't. We'll go through all of that next Sunday, again, 12:30 PM. We'll go through the Lewis Hamilton contract situation, the situation Alfa Romeo and Haas. There is definitely a decent chance that their driver lineups will be changing. And we'll also get into AlphaTauri, Williams possibly, and we'll look at, obviously, Red Bull with Sergio Perez, who is still not confirmed for, the future. So, yeah, we'll go through all of that next Sunday. And then the Sunday after, the 20th of August, live again at 12:30 PM, I am going to be previewing the rest of the season. And we'll look at, really, the key battles. The battle for third in the championship is what we're going to be looking at probably the most, between McLaren, Ferrari, and Aston Martin. The midfield battle as well. And if there has been any F1 news or enough F1 news that is interesting enough between now and that stream, then I will go through it in the 20th of August stream. And then a few days after that, we'll be kicking off coverage for the Dutch Grand Prix weekend at Zandvoort. So we're not that far away, guys. Only 3 more weeks until race day at Zandvoort. So make sure to come along for those streams. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can subscribe right there. And for everybody watching, smash that like button. 21 likes are on at the minute. Let's try and get up to 25 or even 30 plus likes if we can by the end of this stream. But, yeah, and as well, make sure to keep voting in that poll at the top of the live chat. What has been the best race of the season so far? The options that I have put are Australia, Miami, Austria, Canada. Let me know what race has been the best race of the season so far. There's not a standout because we haven't had a proper great race this year, but let me know if you can. Anyway, but before I get on to some of your comments, obviously I'll try and read out the best ones I can. It is now time to get on to my driver rankings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to front. So I'm going to start at the worst drivers and then go to, all the way up to the best. Again, let me know your top 10 list of drivers for this season. And let me know whether you agree or disagree with some of my rankings. So, in 20th, I've decided to go Daniel Ricciardo. Only reason is because, we haven't seen enough from him to really judge how he's done so far this season. He's had a good return. His pace compared to Tsunoda is very good. Again, there's not been enough data really to suggest how good Ricciardo has been this season. The 21st best driver this season, of course, is Nick De Vries. That's why I left him in 21st. And the reason I've left De Vries in 21st behind Ricciardo is because even though Ricciardo has only done 2 races, he's already been closer to Tsunoda than De Vries could ever manage. So, yeah, Ricciardo, that's why I've gone with him in 20th. But maybe, if you want to exclude him, you can put De Vries in 20th. 19th, Logan Sargent. Logan has been poor as far as I'm concerned. I know it's his debut season, but he is way too slow compared to his teammate Alex Albon. He's not, a tenth or two slower. We're talking half a second at times, if not more, compared to Albon. It's been shocking, his performance at times. And it really has cost Williams at times this year, because there has been race weekends where Logan could have maybe scored an extra point or two for the team when they were looking, quite quick. Silverstone, for example, where Williams was super quick. Albon, of course, finished in 8th place. Logan was half a second per lap slower than Alex, and that's why Logan did not finish in the points. Spa was a lot slower than Alex, and that's why he wasn't anywhere near him. And yeah, at times at the start of the season as well, Logan is nowhere near his teammate. I will obviously, give him time, give him to the end of the season to see how he does. But if this is the best he's going to be in Formula 1, then he's going to be out of Formula 1 pretty quickly. Because if you are half a second per lap or close to half a second per lap slower than Alex Albon, no disrespect to Alex, then I'm not sure you deserve to be in Formula 1, because it's not like Alex Albon is one of the best drivers on the grid or anything. And in 18th, I've gone Lance Stroll. What a shocker of a season it has been for Lance. He has been terrible. Other than a couple races where I thought he did decently well. Spanish Grand Prix, for example, where he out-qualified and out-raced Fernando. That was a good weekend. There was another good weekend, or good-ish weekend he had. Bahrain, you could say, probably given his wrist issue. But other than that, not only has he been dominated by Alonso, he has been destroyed, and at times has been in a completely different race to Fernando. There's even been races where Fernando has lapped Lance Stroll. He has been terrible, and if it wasn't for his dad owning the team, let's be honest here, he wouldn't be at the team with this type of performance. Because he has cost Aston Martin a lot of points, where if they had a lot more competitive of a number 2 to Alonso, say a Hülkenberg or a Gasly, someone like that, then Aston Martin would probably be like 30 points clear of Ferrari and not even be that far away from Mercedes, to be honest. But yeah, Lance has been terrible. This has been, I would say, not maybe his worst season in Formula 1. I'd probably say 2018, you could argue, was maybe his worst. It's hard to say, to be honest. I need to properly look at it to determine what's his worst season so far in his career. But this has got to be definitely a strong contender for, worst race of his, or worst season of his career so far, because he has been performing nowhere near the capabilities of the car itself. Like I said, maybe it is because of the wrist issue. Not sure. But yeah, with Stroll, at the end of the day, the performance has been awful. 17th best is Kevin Magnussen. In the races, interestingly, as I'll get onto later, and you'll see, he's been very competitive compared to Hülkenberg. But in qualifying, he has been horrendous. Normally in qualifying, as we've seen in his career, that's normally where he is at his stunning best. We've seen so many great qualifying laps from him in the past. But this season, he's been terrible. So many times knocked out in Q1, and so far away from his teammate Hülkenberg, who has been regularly in Q3 in 2023. So, yeah, it's been a terrible season. He's I think 17th, is it, in the championship, or 18th in the championship. Just a really poor season. He's made Hulkenberg look like one of the best drivers on the grid, when we know, even though Hulkenberg's had a good year, we know Hulkenberg is not one of the best drivers on the grid. So, yeah, Magnussen, poor season, and looks like his Formula One future is really in the air because of those poor performances. Haas, who will be title sponsored by Alfa Romeo, we believe, next year. That's not confirmed, by the way. That's just a rumour, a strong rumour that will probably be confirmed soon. There is a decent chance that they will look to move on Kevin Magnussen. Maybe sign up one of the drivers at the Alfa Romeo Sauber team. Talking of that team, let's get into their drivers. 16th best driver, Zhou Guanyu. Zhou has been not terrible necessarily. There's been a couple of races where he has been terrible. Hungary, of course, after an amazing qualifying, was absolutely just shit in the race. Awful start. Eliminated a couple of drivers from the race, and then his pace in the race was pretty poor as well. It was just horrendous all around from him. But yeah, I don't think he's been terrible this year necessarily. He's just been incredibly mid. If you don't know what that term means, it basically means average. He's just, that's all he's been. He's had a couple good points finishes in Australia and in especially Spain, which I would say is his best weekend of the season so far. Other than that, though, he hasn't really done anything. So, yeah, it's just been a very mid-season for Zhou Guanyu. And his teammate, Valtteri Bottas, who I think is the 15th best driver so far this season, he's been better than Zhou. There's no doubt about that. I've seen so many people online saying ridiculous shit like Zhou has been just as good, if not better, which is factually incorrect. Yeah, he's not been thrashing Zhou, and he has been better than Zhou, but Bottas, I would also say, has been quite mid as well. Has had a couple very good race weekends. Bahrain, I thought he had a brilliant weekend there, where he finished in 8th place, just about holding off Gasly for 4 very important points. Had a great weekend in Canada, where he at one point was looking like he was going to finish in possibly 8th or even 9th place was Bottas. Has had a few other decent races as well this year, but again, a lot of the time it's just been bang average from him, and he's been hovering outside of the points. Alfa Romeo, a lot of the time, I think, do have a fast enough car to actually get into the points, but their two drivers just don't perform consistently well enough to, for that to happen. And a lot of the time they're just average performers, and that's why I've gone for them in 15th and 16th, which is, funnily enough, where they are in the championship. Just want to say quickly, massive thank you to I the N, I think is how you pronounce it, I'm not sure, who has sent in a super chat for £20. That is massively appreciated. And they say, always enjoy your coverage. Yeah, great to see you send that in. And yeah, appreciate it, and hope that I can keep it up for you. And keep it up, of course, for everybody else. So, let's get into the 14th best driver of the season, which might be a surprise to some of you. Pierre Gasly. Now, I know some of you may say, well, he's been a bit closer to Ocon than people think, which is true. But I think even when he has been closer to Ocon, if not beating Ocon, whether it's qualifying or the race, those particular performances have not been that great. When I look at his season, Australia, of course, he was heading for a great result. Then he crashed with his teammate on the restart of the race, which really destroyed all of that good work. Had a really good race weekend in Miami. Had a decent weekend in Monaco. Then again, his teammate was on the podium, so definitely could have been better from Gasly. His pace in Spain, I remember, was very good, but had a grid penalty for his own actions. other than that, I mean, he had a very good sprint race, of course, and sprint day in Spa, but other than that, he's not really done much of anything in 2023. Did come back from the back of the grid to finish 9th in Bahrain, but I don't think that was necessarily the toughest thing to do, because Alpine did have the best midfield car at the start of the season. So, yeah, I don't think that it was... I mean, it was a good performance, but it wasn't an amazing performance necessarily from Gasly. And I will say, not only with Gasly, but with Ocon as well, I don't think Ocon has had an amazing season despite that podium in Monaco. But yeah, Gasly, as I'll show in a moment, I don't think has had as an impressive season given the performance of his car as a couple drivers just ahead of him. 13th best, Yuki Tsunoda. You may think I'm underrating Tsunoda's season so far, but I think the reason I've got him only in 13th and not in the top 10 or, you know, just outside the top 10 and say 11th is for a good reason. I will just quickly clarify though, Tsunoda has had a great season. AlphaTauri have had most of this year the worst car. There is no doubt about that. He had some great performances, obviously, in Monaco, Spain. Obviously, those 2 weekends he was robbed of, what should have been a points finish by either the stewards or a failure with the car. Almost scored points in the first 2 races as well. So he's been a bit unlucky this year, but, it's been a great season. There's no doubt about that. The reason, though, I'm not ranking him as high as maybe others would is because I don't think his performances or the level he's been performing at is necessarily as impressive as some people would like to make out. Because for the first 10 races of the season, Nick de Vries was his teammate, and Nick de Vries was terrible, let's be honest. And definitely that made Yuki Tsunoda look a lot better than he actually is, which is why I've not got him in the top 10 drivers of the season so far. And the same goes really for Alex Albon, who is someone I'll get on to soon enough. Albon, has had great performances this year, but he also is made to look a lot better because his teammate this year and his teammate last year are nowhere near him and are not that good. So we have to factor that in. And given how Ricciardo, who is now his new teammate, immediately got on the pace with Tsunoda and beat him on pace in qualifying in Hungary and was quicker in the race even despite, being punted off at turn 1, I really, do think that calls into question how impressive has Tsunoda's season been, given that, again, Nick de Vries, who performed so poorly, was his teammate for those first 10 races. In my view, it's been a very impressive season. Given his ability, I'd say a great season because the car has been quite poor. But let's not pretend that Tsunoda has been one of the best drivers this season, because I wouldn't say necessarily that is true. He's been one of the most impressive, but that doesn't mean one of the best. And he's been one of the most surprising, but again, that doesn't necessarily mean you've been one of the best drivers this year. So that's why I've got Tsunoda in 13th. Also want to read out a super chat from Mental Jock for 50 AED. I'm not sure what currency that is, but thank you very much. There's love F1 content. Keep it up. Thanks a lot for that. Massively appreciated, as usual. So yeah, that's why I got Tsunoda in 13th. In 12th, Nico Hülkenberg. The reason I've got Hülkenberg in 12th, ahead of Tsunoda and Gasly, is purely because his performances in qualifying have been just incredible. Obviously in Canada, was up in 2nd. Did get a grid penalty later on for speeding, I think under red flags or yellow flags, I think it might have been. Not sure exactly, but yeah, Hülkenberg had a great performance there. He was in Q3 in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Austria, Spain, where else? Hungary. Silverstone was it as well? No, he just missed out. But I think he's made Q3 like 80% of the time so far this season, which is so impressive for him because I've never thought of Hulkenberg as a driver that is consistently very quick over a qualifying lap. So that's why I've got him up in 12th place, despite him not being very high in the Drivers' Championship. The reason, though, I don't have him any higher is because let's say the car was a bit quicker over a race distance than it is at the minute, and they have the same issue, of course, as Ferrari do, can't look after their tyres. We don't know for sure what his actual results would be. So we can't sit here and say for sure, where would he be if it wasn't for these issues. So, yeah, that's why I've not got him any higher. But it's been a very impressive season and a very good return for Nico Hulkenberg. And just outside of the top 10, Alexander Albon. Albon, has had some few great performances this year. The 7th in Canada on a one-stop strategy, which was just an amazing performance. You had, obviously, the 8th at Silverstone. Williams were pretty quick that weekend, but to deliver the weekend he did was still mightily impressive. Obviously scored points for Williams back in Bahrain. Qualified up in P7 in Australia. Would have loved to have seen if he had not made that mistake where they would have finished. But yeah, he's had some really great performances this year. And especially as of late, really since the Williams car improved in Canada where they brought a massive upgrade and a B-spec car, he's been consistently performing very well. So yeah, Albon has been on a really good form as of late, and I've been impressed by him this year. And I think he's definitely improved from what we saw at Red Bull in 2020. Of course, compared to Max Verstappen, nobody, 90%, maybe not 90%, but 80% of the drivers on the grid are not going to get anywhere near Max Verstappen in the same team. But I think he's definitely improved at Williams. But the reason I've not got him any higher is because, once again, his teammate, I don't think is really... Logan Sargent is not performing well enough to be in Formula 1. The reason I'm not calling for Logan to be dropped is because it's his debut season, and he is quite a bit younger than, say, Nick De Vries, who had this as his debut season for AlphaTauri, and hasn't necessarily got all the experience he needs to maximise his own performance. So that's why I'm not calling for him to go necessarily as of yet. But Logan is not performing at a Formula 1 level, which is why I can't put Albon in the top 10, because I would love to see how he would compare to a driver who is good enough for Formula 1. Now, maybe you might argue that this driver I'm about to mention isn't necessarily good enough, but I would love to see if he had Kevin Magnussen or Mick Schumacher, for example, as a teammate, just how good he would be. Because, obviously, since 2020, when he was dropped from Red Bull, his two teammates have been Nicholas Latifi and Logan Sargent. Not exactly stiff competition, is it? So that's why I can't put him in the top 10. And in 10th place, I've gone for Esteban Ocon. The reason I've gone for him a bit higher up than Gasly is because, one, the performance in Monaco was incredible to get as high a grid position as he did and secure Alpine's only podium of the year, but has also had some other great race performances. Saudi Arabia, he was on top form at Spa in the race last week. I thought he had a great performance. He was one of the stars of the show, really. Canada, Spain, again, got the best out of the car, really, given Alpine's pace those particular weekends. And Ocon, I do believe, has been better than Pierre Gasly. I've got to say, though, the gap from Ocon, through Albon, Hulkenberg, Tsunoda, Gasly, that part of the field was very hard to select for each position, because I think they've all been performance-wise as drivers very close to one another. So yeah, Esteban Ocon is in the top 10, but needs to be a bit more consistent, because he did go on a bit of a bad run after the Canadian Grand Prix, where he wasn't really that quick, and his performance levels were, certainly had dipped since that podium in Monaco. So that's why I've gone with him in 10th. The 9th best driver this season, Sergio Perez. The reason I've not got him outside the top 10 is because, like I said earlier, I don't think he's been as bad as people like to make out. Half of the season so far, he's been performing at a good enough level. The other half of the season, he's been terrible. I know. And that's why I've got him down in 9th, as the 9th best driver this year. Also, compared to, say, the Alpine drivers and Tsunoda, Albon drivers like that, the reason I've got him ahead of those drivers, not because necessarily he is better than them, it's because it's too hard to compare those drivers to Perez, because Perez is in a car that is so astronomically clear of the Williams, Alpine, AlphaTauri, Haas, that you just can't really get a good enough gauge on compared to those drivers where he is. Now, you may think, how come you've then ranked Lance Stroll, who's also been in a front-running car, so far down? Well, the reason is because Stroll has been terrible for the entire season so far. When with Perez, again, half the time he's been good, half the time he's been shit. That's why I've got him about halfway in the field, and just ahead of Esteban Ocon as the 9th best driver of the 9th best driver in the 2023 season so far. Just saw a comment actually in the chat. Let me just quickly read it out from Willaform Gaming, who says, "You can't put Albon and Tsunoda down because of their teammates." You absolutely can, because at the end of the day, how impressive your performance is, it really, the best indicator as to how impressive your performance is who your teammate is. That's why Lewis Hamilton, for example, had an amazing season, and really proof of that amazing season is how he's been quite dominant over Russell, who is, not far, is very close to the level of Lewis Hamilton, in terms of talent, ability, skill, all of that. If you have a teammate who is not only nowhere near your level, but is also not even good enough really for Formula One, or performing well enough for Formula One, then I can't rank them as high for that. Put it this way, if Alex Albon had Yuki Tsunoda, for example, as a teammate, and he was beating Tsunoda as much as he's beaten Sargent, I would put Albon in the top 10 without a doubt. But Logan Sargent is not performing at a Formula One level, so I can't put him in there because 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 when they've got a teammate that is so far, not just so far away from them, but is performing at a level which is not good enough for Formula One, then it does put doubt into my mind, and it should put doubt into a lot of people's minds as to, the performances are good for Albon and Tsunoda, but is the car actually as bad at times as we think, or is it just that, they just haven't got as good of a driver lineup, let's say, those two teams, as they should have to get the best out of the car? So there's that as well. Because, let's say if Alex Albon had a proper competitive teammate for this year who was matching him at Silverstone, for example, where Williams were so quick, Williams probably would have scored points with both cars, making Albon's performance then less impressive. You see what I mean? See how it works? So that's why I can't rank them as high. And Will F1 Gaming saying, you have to judge a driver's performance based on the car as well. I also do judge it on that. I judge it on many things. I look at the championship standings just to see how they are relative to their teammates and to other people in, slower cars. But I also do take into account who their teammate is. And also, what do you call it? I do take into account the performance of the car as well as to where I rank certain drivers. That's why I've got Perez down in 9th, because the car is quite clearly the best car out there on the grid. Anyway, let's get into the top 8. So, the 8th best driver this season, Carlos Sainz. Like I said, I think he's been, maybe not every race, but 95% of the time he's been consistently average. Has been really, I think his results more so dependent on the performance of the car. I don't think Sainz has really put in any performances or any, major performances this year which stand out as a race weekend where he was outperforming the car or performing at a level that was, quite high compared to normal for him. So that's why I've gone with Carlos Sainz in 8th. Again, he's been consistent, which is good. Consistency is the absolute first thing, really, you need to succeed in Formula 1. Of course, all the drivers are talented and very quick. That is a given. That's why they're there. Or that's why they've been chosen, because of the potential that has been seen. But again, it's about consistency. So Sainz is doing a good job when it comes to consistency, but he's just not on the same level as his teammate, and is not able to get necessarily the best out of the car at all times, and is not necessarily able to shine that brightly compared to other drivers in a lot of weekends, and just kind of ends up somewhere in the pack, somewhere in the top 8 or top 7. So yeah, I guess consistency is something we can praise him for. The 7th best driver, George Russell. I don't think Russell, again, has been as bad necessarily as some people make out. Of course, I have been very critical of him. I think he's been, in certain race weekends, very poor. The issue, though, is not that that he hasn't got the pace. He absolutely has got the pace. It's the consistency. If he had the consistency of Carlos Sainz, Russell I probably would put up in the top 5 or even top 4 for this season. So yeah, that's why I've got him down in 7th place. Just needs to work on that consistency, and for the end of the season I could probably put him in maybe to the top 5. 6th best driver this season, I am going Oscar Piastri. Now, I know that might sound like a surprise, but, given that it's not been easy for him, and obviously he's paired with a teammate that is one of the best in the world, Lando Norris, of course, his teammate, so incredibly quick, I think his performance this year has been really quite special. Even before the upgrade, there were so many weekends where he put in great performances. Obviously, the Q3 lap, or the lap to get into Q3 in Saudi Arabia, and also to secure 8th on the grid. Also made Q3 in Spain and Canada, and then obviously recently has had some great performances as well. And even though he's been consistently out-qualified and out-raced by Lando, he has been consistently impressive as Oscar, and I don't think really you can ask that much more of him this year. Maybe there's a race or two where you could say could have been better, say Hungary, because obviously he dropped off a lot in that race. I know he had some damage, but I think also was struggling with the tyres quite a bit, was Oscar. So yeah, there's definitely work still to be done if he's to get to Lando's level, but yeah, I think he's been the 6th best driver this season. Now into the top 5. And the 5th best driver of the year so far, Charles Leclerc. Like I said earlier, and the stats prove it, he is better than Carlos Sainz and has been this season. hasn't had the greatest year, was a bit inconsistent to start the year, but really once we got properly into the European season, he's been consistently beating Carlos Sainz and has been consistently quicker than Carlos as well, and it's been Ferrari's main hope. The issue at Ferrari is definitely not Charles Leclerc, like some ex-drivers out there have tried to make out, and some people out there trying to make out like Leclerc is the issue. Leclerc is not the issue. The issue is the car, and at times, the team as well. That is what is causing Leclerc to be held back as of late. And yeah, has improved his performances quite a bit since the European season got going. But yeah, still some work to do. Still could be probably a tad more consistent Leclerc. And if the car can improve by 2 or 3 tenths of a second, there is absolutely no doubt that I could rank him higher by the end of the season, Leclerc. So we'll see how he can get on in the second half of the season, whether he can keep up that good form as of late. The 4th best driver of the year, Lando Norris. I think he's been absolutely brilliant. Compared to Oscar Piastri, who is very talented, very quick, I think he's been brilliant. He's really, even though the lap time difference between the two is not that big, statistically, he has smashed Oscar Piastri 10-2 in qualifying, and 10-2, or was it 9-2? I think in the races, I think it was for Lando over Oscar. Just an absolutely brilliant season for Lando. Has had a couple race weekends where he wasn't at his best. Saudi Arabia was one where, of course, he crashed in qualifying, forced him to be knocked out in Q1. There was another race weekend where I didn't feel like he was great. Spa, the weekend we just had, he was slower than Piastri, really, the entire weekend. But other than that, he's been on top form. He's been McLaren's man and is still McLaren's man going forward. And as far as I'm concerned, right now, he is one of the top 5 best drivers in the world. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind about that. And we'll see whether he can keep that up. Into the top 3, Lewis Hamilton. As I've said before, great season. A lot closer to his absolute best version. Not at his absolute best version. He's still not quite there yet. But I'm sure once the car gets a bit more to his liking, we will see even more of that great Lewis Hamilton we've seen glimpses of in recent races. Hamilton, great season, consistently in the races, has been beating George Russell, which has been really the biggest improvement for him compared to 2022. And without a doubt, he is one of the top 3 best drivers in the world. And I would probably say for this, not this year, but I would say overall, in terms of who are the best drivers in the world, I'd say Hamilton is still outside of Max Verstappen. It's very hard to say that anybody else other than Max Verstappen is better than him. He's not been the second best driver this year necessarily, but consistently, of course, Hamilton has been brilliant in this season, and consistently, of course, over the last few years has been absolutely superb. Second best driver of the year, Fernando Alonso. What a season. He's got the absolute maximum out of the Aston Martin pretty much every race weekend, so I can't really blame him. The only weekend where he was a bit poor was probably Spain, where he was out-qualified and out-raced by his teammate, but other than that, he's been great. So, yeah, brilliant season for Fernando. Fernando is one of the best drivers in the world. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. And Fernando, back to really where he deserves to be, which is one of the best drivers in Formula 1. And the best driver this season, of course, is Max Verstappen. There is absolutely zero doubt in my mind about that. I know the Red Bull car is the best, and yes, Sergio Perez at times has performed poorly, but his performances and his consistency, not just in the races, but in qualifying the entire weekend, has been brutal. And incredible, really, to witness. He is performing at the level that Lewis Hamilton was at 3 or 4 years ago, or Michael Schumacher was at in the early 2000s, that Sebastian Vettel was at in 10 years ago, that Senna was at in his prime. That's the company he is keeping with his current performances. And yeah, has now 8 wins in a row, 2 more wins in the next 2 races, and he will be the most, or have the longest winning streak out of any driver in Formula One history. We'll see if we can get it. But yeah, he's definitely been, despite having the best car, the best driver of the season so far. So guys, let me know in the chat what you thought of, what you thought of my rankings there. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know your rankings for the top 10 or for certain drivers. Let me know in the live chat, and I'll make sure to get to your comments in a moment. Just wanted to say, again, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. And as well, we are on, 26 likes. Let's try and get up to 30 plus if we can by the end of the stream. I'm not, by the way, going to read out too many comments from the chat because I've already gone almost 2 hours. So I don't want to be going, I don't want to be live for necessarily that much longer. Because, I don't want to be going live for another, I don't want to be live, say, for another hour or so necessarily. So yeah, I'll read out some of the best comments I can find, and then we'll get onto the final few midfield teams and just cover them and have a look at their seasons so far. But yeah, naturally, before I come to your comments in the chat, one thing I will do, have a quick drink. So I'll be back with you guys in just a second. Right, so that should be a bit better. And yeah, I'll just come on to your comments now. Some of your comments, again, won't be able to get through all of them. Well, I'll try and get through some of them, or some of the best, say, recent ones. Hello to all of you, by the way. Hope you're all doing well and having a good August. Right, let me find. So Dane saying in the chat, you could debate Alonso right now could win a championship against Hamilton. Absolutely he could. There's no doubt about that. I've had no doubt about that ever since I started watching Formula One. He absolutely could beat Lewis Hamilton to a championship. It's dependent, though, on what car he's got and the team he's racing for. That's that's what it depends on at the end of the day. Of course, he's not in a title-winning position at the minute. The only reason, really, I've got him ahead of Hamilton is because I feel like he's been slightly more consistent this season than Hamilton, which is why I've got him ahead. Because Hamilton, we have to remember, and yeah, this is probably because of the improvement in the car design that we saw since Monaco, but Hamilton wasn't at his best, let's say, in the first 5 races. There was a couple races, I think Saudi Arabia and Miami, where he wasn't really he wasn't bright, really. He wasn't, he didn't look like he was really at anywhere near his level, at anywhere near the level that he normally is at. So that's why, really, I've got Alonso ahead of Hamilton, but we'll see how the rest of the season goes in terms of who finishes ahead by the end of the season in my rankings. Let me find some other comments. Darth Lord Raven says Leclerc is better than P5, only the Ferrari is garbage. Laurie Rastogi, that's why I'd swap Lando and Charles. Lap time isn't big between Piastri and Lando, and Piastri is in his first year. It is possible Piastri will eventually better Lando overall. I understand your logic behind what you're saying. The lap time difference between Lando and Oscar is not that big, but at the end of the day, factually, Lando has outqualified Oscar 90% of the time. So, I don't know it's his debut season, but one thing I don't want to do, and this is why I tried not to mention with Oscar it being his debut season, I tried not to mention that when I showed my driver rankings, is because I don't want to rank a driver being in a much higher position just because it's his debut season. Just because it's your debut season doesn't mean that, doesn't mean that you necessarily deserve to be ranked higher because, it's impressive for a debut season. I try to rank the drivers based on, what they actually have done, given the circumstances of, their teammate, the car, etc. Like I mentioned before, I try not to factor in the debut season with it. But I mean, for Piastri, it's a good omen going forward. But yeah, that's really why I've got Lando ahead of Leclerc, is because I feel like Lando's been, one, more consistent. Secondly, with Lando, him outqualifying Piastri by as much as he has is more impressive than Leclerc outqualifying Carlos by, less times than Lando has compared to Piastri. Willa von Gaming says I've ranked Russell 13th. I don't think he's been that bad. He's been, as you said, I think earlier. Did you say earlier he's been lackluster? Yeah, you did. He has been lackluster, but I don't think he's been that bad. I think one thing we have to remember, though, is it is hard, again, to compare the drivers racing for front-running teams to drivers racing in midfield cars a lot of the times outside of the points. Because there's such a big difference between the drivers, you can't actually know for sure a lot of the time whether those midfield drivers would actually get better results, or whether, what circumstances are. I mean, that's why I've got Perez, up in the top 10 still, because hard to compare him to the Alpine, Haas, AlphaTauri drivers, etc. Willa von Gaming says there is absolutely no way Perez has been more impressive than Albon, Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, and the Alpines. Again, though, that's not my driver rankings. It's not based on who's been the most impressive. It's based on who's been the best in that order this year. That's what I do it on. I don't base it on who has been the most impressive. If I did a most impressive list, it would be quite different. You'd have Tsunoda, Albon in the top 10. If it's based on impressive. Piastri probably quite a bit higher. Again, etc. So yeah, I don't base it on that. I base it purely on pure, performance rather than who has been surprisingly good or who's been impressive. Darth Lord Raven saying Ocon P10. What? Well, let me know. Why do you think, Ocon doesn't deserve to be in the top 10? Will von Gaming earlier saying if Russell is in the top 7, it's simply wrong and ridiculous. Russell has been average. I mean, I don't think I think he's been probably slightly above average, has Russell. But again, I can't sit here and say that I think Tsunoda has been better or Albon has been better or Ocon has been better this season than Russell. Again, Albon and Tsunoda, have they been more impressive? Yeah. That doesn't mean better. I mean, Tsunoda has been more impressive this season than Lewis Hamilton, but he's not performed better than Lewis Hamilton. Again, that's what I'm trying to illustrate. Laurie Rastogi saying, that's fair enough, Chaz. You'd be going for most impressive rather than facts. Yeah, I try to stick to more like factual based, because that's what I think it should be based on when you do a ranking for the drivers so far. It should be based on legitimately how they've performed in reality. Because I remember, and this is not a criticism of the guy, because as a person, he's a great guy, but Tomo, of course, you guys know, massively popular F1 YouTuber. I don't know if it was an end-of-season review for the drivers for last year or mid-season, but he had Zhou ahead of Bottas, even though Bottas out-qualified and out-raced Zhou, purely because Zhou was in his debut season. Which I get, again, if he's doing that based on who's been most impressive, that makes sense, but I was watching it with the belief of him, meaning who's been better. So, yeah, that's why I was a bit, what do you call it? Maybe confused by that, or just disagreed in general, because I that's my just it's just a belief that I think the driver ranking should be based on who has actually been better rather than just who's been more impressive. But if people want to do their lists based on who's been surprisingly better, who's been impressive or whatever, then go for it. Absolutely no problem with that. Let me find a couple other comments here if I can. Laurie Rastogi says, I believe the fans voted Zhou ahead of Bottas, not Tomo. Maybe. The video I watched, I think it was at the start of the year, I went back and looked at his end of season report, I think, or whatever it was that he did for the drivers. And yeah, I saw that and I was like, how the fuck has he got Zhou ahead of Bottas? But yeah, maybe it was the fans that did that. But let me just scroll a bit sooner up the chat and see if I can find any other comments. Laurie Rastogi earlier saying Chassis deserves as many subscribers as the F1 word. Here's for that. Of course, it will be a miracle if I ever get up to that many subs, because I think he's got like, what, 130k? I think he has. Let me just have a quick look. See what he's on. I haven't looked at his channel in a while. Yeah, he's nearly there. Yeah, here's for that. And yeah, I mean, we're obviously still growing the channel. Let's hope we can get to 13,000 subs. Hopefully by the end of the year would be nice, but we'll see on that. But let me go back down a bit further. Just trying to see if I can find a couple more really good comments to read out before I go through the rest of the teams. And I will try to spend less time on the other teams. Yeah. Hold on, I'm just trying to see if I can find a lot of the comments, just you guys reacting to my rankings, which I think I've read. Really, the most important comments, which get across the points you guys are making. Right, so Laurie Rastogi, he posted his top 10 earlier of Max, Alonso, Lewis, Charles, Lando, George, Piastri, Sainz, Ocon, Hulkenberg. Yeah, that's fair enough. The top, what do you call it? The top 8 that you've gone for, I think it is, looks fine. Even the top 9, to be honest, so yeah. Laurie, am I allowed to ask Cheza? Yeah, you can ask. Ask anything, really. Have you ever done any karting before? I have. I did some, whenever we would go to as a kid, a holiday park, I would do, some karting around, the basic little tracks they have there. I did, I think about 10 years ago was the last time I went karting at a track nearby, probably about half an hour from where I live, and I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but I was like terrified of it wasn't the speed. I think because before I went karting, then it was like 20. I think actually, I remember it was right around the last time I went karting. It was right around when Lewis Hamilton won his first championship for Mercedes, which would have been end of 2014. I remember it was sometime around then, because I remember that race being like maybe a week before or a week after. I can't remember exactly, but I know it was around that time. And I was 16 at the time. But because of how much I had grown since I was 7, 8 years old when I was karting at some of these holiday places, the size of me, and I'm quite a big person. I'm, 6'2", 6'3". The size of me in a go-kart, I just didn't feel comfortable. And I felt like every time I turned the corner, I was going to literally just fall out of the cart. Progressively, I did get better. But yeah, it's because physically I'd not been in a kart in so long, and because I'd obviously grown so much since I was, 7 or 8 years old, it just freaked me out. I've not really grown since then, so if I got into a go-kart now, it probably wouldn't be as bad. But yeah, that was the last time I went karting, was about 9 to 10 years ago. Let me find say one more comment. Dane's saying, I do agree Vettel and Raikkonen are underrated. They are controversially, in my opinion, better than Hamilton and Alonso. Well, that's quite a statement to make, but again, that's your view. As long as you've got, understandable logic that backs up what you're thinking or saying. Anyway, let's go to the rest of the teams, as I've been live for quite a while, and I want to, get this done. So let's go now to Alpine, who at times in the first few races of the season were looking great, but it has devolved into a mess of a season. They have not hit their targets for this year. They wanted definitely to still be ahead of McLaren, which they were for the first 8 races of the season, but then McLaren brought their upgrade, and McLaren have been on a different planet ever since then. They are miles quicker than Alpine, so that's why Alpine have fallen back to 6th, and why they're now having such a disappointing 2023 season. They've now got rid of Laurent Rossi, their CEO, then Otmar Safnauer and Alan Permane. They're a team in crisis, really, given their expectation for all the resources they have, the money that has been spent, all of that stuff. And yeah, they're now in 6th. But this is just the same old story with this team. They've been doing this ever since they came back into Formula 1 as a works team. I mean, the best season they've had was what? Last year, finishing 4th, and then 4th in 2018. There's other seasons where they had a couple podiums, but still ended up finishing, I think, 5th in the championship. They even won a race in 2021, albeit quite a bit lucky, but still 5th in the championship. They have showed promise every season of, something special, but they don't know how to actually unlock it permanently. And that's why they're in this never-ending loop of, the occasional podium, really impressive result, maybe even an impressive season, but they can never do it consistently. And yeah, that's why they're in the position they are now in. The two drivers, as I went through, I don't think they've been bad this season necessarily, but I don't think they've been great either. Ocon, I think, has had a good, not great season. Pierre Gasly, I think, has probably had a closer to average season as the Alpine driver. And, I mean, the only positive, really, for Alpine is their two drivers have been very close to one another, and they are the closest teammates to each other when it comes to qualifying and the race head-to-head. In qualifying, they are dead level, 6-6 in qualifying. And in the races, once you exclude the DNFs, there has been a couple of races, by the way, where Alpine have retired with both cars. Hungary being one race, Silverstone, and there was another race where, Australia, where, of course, they both took each other out. So, yeah, it's been, I mean, that absolutely has not helped with Alpine's 2023 season. But in the races, Ocon just about takes it in the races that they both finished. And Alpine have had only one top 7 finish in 2023, which is quite poor. And that one top 7 finish is the podium in Monaco. And when you compare that to this time, in 2022, in 2022, they had a top 7 finish in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Spain, Monaco, Canada, almost every race before that summer break. And I know, of course, they were ahead of McLaren and Aston Martin in 2022, but it just shows you how this team have just not really moved on from last year. They've pretty much got the same car they had last year. And that's why they have fallen off quite a bit. And they're closer, or they are, a midfield team in 2023. Poor season. And, yeah, just a never-ending loop for this team. They're never not going to be a midfield team, as far as I'm concerned, until something major happens. Let's now go on to Williams. Brilliant season for them. 7th in the championship. As I said earlier, the highest they've been in the championship since 2017. And they look likely to keep it for the rest of the year. Alex Albon's had a good season. He's had some really good races. And like I said with my driver rankings, lately, once the car's improved, he's started to really show some good consistency, which is the most impressive thing for me, rather than just the points finishes. Because, everyone can put in a couple really impressive performances, but the difference really between a good to decent, or even a very good to good, or a very good to great driver really is the consistency. And Alex Albon has improved on that consistency quite a bit, really, compared to his Red Bull days, and even compared to last year. So yeah, Alex Albon, brilliant season for him, and Williams looking in a very good position. And I would be shocked if Williams did not finish 7th in the championship, because I don't see Haas and Alfa Romeo or AlphaTauri jumping them in the championship, because I don't think they'll really be quick enough to score enough points before the end of the season. So yeah, that's why I think Williams will secure 7th. For the two drivers, Albon, yeah, he's been very good. Logan Sargent, as I've said, not good enough, and Logan has not performed at a good enough level for Formula 1 so far. Needs to really up his pace by 2 to 3 tenths of a second. If he can do that, then I think we'll start to see Logan performing at a level good enough for Williams. But right now, he's not performing well enough, and these stats prove it, because he's not beaten Albon once in qualifying or in any of the races where both of them have finished. Albon has been 100% over Logan so far this season, and Williams have 3 points finishes in 2023. Brilliant, of course, for the team. Let's now go on to the Haas F1 team. Haas this season have actually had a pretty quick car in that midfield. The issue, though, is, again, can't manage their tyres, terrible race pace, and whatever good work done on a Saturday gets pissed up the wall on a Sunday. So that's why they are not 7th in the championship. And actually, given how good their qualifying has been this season, if they could carry that pace through to a Sunday, they would be putting Alpine under serious pressure, because they would have probably 20 to 30 more points right now than they currently do have. So it just shows you the potential is there for better from the Haas team. They just need to really do some work, really next year, to try and at least find improvements on that issue. I think really, though, them improving on that is dependent on if Ferrari improve on their own tyre issues, because of course Haas still get certain parts from the AlphaTauri team, from the Ferrari team. So you'd have to imagine there is a relation there to a degree between those two teams when it comes to that. So yeah, that's why Haas F1 have struggled to deliver on the potential they clearly do have. Nico Hülkenberg, though, what a season. He has been absolutely brilliant in qualifying, and I would say is performing at the level he was when he was at his best in Formula 1, say, nearly 10 years ago. He is just delivering fantastically. Of course, he is a guarantee, a lock-in for Haas next year. I don't think the contract is officially signed for him for next year. I'm not sure actually when his contract does expire. That he might have already signed when he signed up for this year, a 2-year contract. Yeah, he is contracted, Hülkenberg, to the end of 2024. So Hülkenberg obviously is locked in for next year and will definitely be with the Haas team. Kevin Magnussen, though, yeah, is in quite a bit of trouble. More on that next week when we get into the driver lineup analysis. But Magnussen has been poor. His race performances, though, as I'll just show here, have been good. 5-3, he's beaten Hülkenberg in the races where they finished. In qualifying, though, Hülkenberg has dominated the fight. 9-3 he is over Magnussen. So if Kevin can start equaling or beating Hülkenberg in qualifying, then he's got the potential, Magnussen, maybe for some more points finishes this year. Absolutely. And Haas, I did hear a couple days ago, have got a big upgrade coming. So maybe if he does improve that, performance, it can help him, in the championship, help the team in the championship, but most importantly for Magnussen, help him from getting dropped and losing his place on the grid. So we will see whether Magnussen can deliver, as Haas have only had 3 points finishes in 2023. By the way, I am not including sprint races when I talk about points finishes, because, I'm just not counting that. I'm only counting the Sunday races. But yeah, Haas have not delivered on their potential as usual with them, and there is work to be done for sure. Alfa Romeo have been incredibly mid with both their drivers and their car. Their car's not terrible, but it's just not that good. Both drivers have been close to each other on pace, but, Valtteri Bottas has, again, quite clearly been better than Zhou. The stats do prove it. And Alfa Romeo are no better, really, than they were at the middle of last season, where, if you remember, they started last season very well, then dropped off quite a bit, and that's pretty much where they've been the entirety of this season. And it's because Alfa Romeo can't really develop, or Sauber, they can't develop this car that much because they just don't have the budget, really, to develop it enough to get the best out of it going forward. So that's why Alfa Romeo dropped off a lot compared to 2022, of course, where they finished 6th in the championship. There is still hope, I think, for the rest of the season, because they do have a good race car. They just need to improve on their qualifying performances on a more consistent basis. I know, of course, they were 5th and 7th in qualifying in Hungary, but that was an outlier, really, just a blip when it comes to their usual qualifying form. So yeah, if they can improve on their qualifying speed, maybe they'll get some more points finishes this year, and maybe secure 8th or even 7th in the championship. Let's look at the comparison though between the drivers. In terms of lap time, they have been close to each other, but Bottas 8-4 over Zhou in qualifying and 7-4 over Zhou in the races where they've both finished. Again, on Twitter in recent days, I've seen people saying that Zhou has been just as good, if not better, than Bottas this year. Those people are waffling absolute nonsense, because that is factually incorrect, unless they are talking about impressive. But yeah, I've got to say, a lot of those people that were putting that view out there, they didn't come across as the most intelligent, let's say, when it comes to Formula 1. But yeah, Bottas has been better than Zhou. There is no doubt about that so far this season. And Alfa Romeo, just to illustrate how good their race car is, they've had 4 points finishes this year, which I think is one more than Williams and Haas. So they've got a good race car, just need consistently a better qualifying car, and I reckon maybe a position gain is possible for the team. And the final team, AlphaTauri. Let me just get them up. There you go. Yeah, they have had the worst car this year, and they've had a difficult season. The only shining light has been Yuki Tsunoda, who has had a very good season. And Tsunoda, as far as I'm concerned, has been, yeah, in terms of impressiveness, very impressive. Not necessarily, again, I don't think he's I don't think he's been one of the top 10 performing drivers this season, but I have been impressed by certain performances by Tsunoda. But other than that, AlphaTauri have been pretty bleak in 2023. Nick de Vries, of course, was dropped after 10 very mid and at times very terrible races. And now, Daniel Ricciardo, I'll just go back to him. There you go. Is now in the car and has already shown quite a bit of promise. Was good in Hungary, very good. Beat Tsunoda in qualifying on the race, and in the sprint race at Spa, finished in 9th. Had a decent race on the Sunday, but was starting way too far back, really, to gain what he could out of the race weekend. But I've seen very encouraging signs from Ricciardo. That is for sure. And I think AlphaTauri, if they can keep up their improved pace, which we did see in Hungary and at Spa as well, because they have upgraded their car, especially the rear end of the car, quite a lot in the last month or so. Second half of the year should be better for them in terms of performance, but I'm not sure they will actually climb off the bottom of the championship. Let's just quickly go through some stats with AlphaTauri. So compared to Nick de Vries, Tsunoda was 8-2 over Nick in qualifying. So far, compared to Ricciardo, it's 1 apiece. And AlphaTauri have had 3 points finishes in 2023. Of course, all of them coming from Tsunoda. One in Australia, and then another one in... Where was it? where was the other points finish? Well, Spa, that was another one. And then there was a third one. Baku, there you go. Baku was the third one where he finished brilliantly in P10 and qualified 8th place that weekend. Yeah, good season for Tsunoda, but AlphaTauri at the back of the grid. But guys, that has been it for my mid-season review for 2023. Thank you guys for coming along. Let me just finish up the poll in the live chat where I've asked you guys, what is the best race of the 2023 season so far? And out of the options, which were Miami, Australia, and Canada, you guys, with 48 votes, voted overall for Miami with 35% of the vote. Australia second, 33% of the vote. Austria third, 27%. Canada fourth with 4% of the vote. I would probably go Australia as the best race so far, but yeah, I can understand why you guys go for Miami. Miami was actually a pretty good race, looking back at it. But yeah, still, we're looking for a really good, standout, even not great race this season. But thank you guys a lot for voting. And of course, thanks a lot for coming along. A reminder again of the next 2 live streams on the channel. Next Sunday, I'll be live at 12:30 PM UK time for an F1 2024 driver lineup analysis. We'll go through the drivers at risk of losing their seats, what driver moves could happen. Obviously, the Lewis Hamilton contract situation being something we'll look at. And we'll go through all of the possibilities. And then the Sunday after, on the 20th of August, live again at 12:30 PM, we're going to preview the rest of the season and really just look at the battles that are yet to be decided for the rest of the season and talking points that are yet to be settled on for the rest of 2023. So make sure to come along to those 2 streams as well, guys, during the summer break. But yeah, if you are new to the channel, before you go, don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to smash a like button before you go. Would be great if you could do so. Thank you guys to the super chats, the people that have sent in the super chats. Been fantastic for you guys sending those in, those particular people that did. And as well, if you want to keep up with content on my channel, make sure to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. Another great place to keep up with content is my Discord server. Link below in the description and in the live chat as well. And there is over 500 members of that Discord. If you want to be a part of our community and get notifications for the streams and videos, and just content updates overall, make sure to join the Discord. But guys, until next Sunday at 12:30 PM UK time for a driver lineup analysis going into 2024, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.